Oh well, I hope that lamp isn't coming down as well. Welcome back to a new Hints and Theories video, this time about episode number 2. My name is Julia and here on this channel I present you hints and theories that will hopefully help you figure out who the mole is. So if you do not want to miss any of that, then please subscribe to this channel and also check out my Instagram. And unfortunately Zamya's out of the game. She had to leave the mole group, which is kind of sad, I think, because I thought she was a very interesting and very fun candidate. She always had a huge smile on her face, but she also had her suspicious moments, which made her very interesting, and I'm sure we would have had a lot more interesting situations with her in the upcoming weeks. So yeah, it's a bit sad that she's gone now. Let's start right away with task number 1, the one with the train, and in that one we had like 2 groups. One was on the train and the other one was, well, outside building those net constructions with more or less the help of Harry. And let's have a look at the group on the train first. I mean, in general, all in all, they did a good job because they only had one wrong item. But when it came to throwing those things, well then they failed terribly. Still, while being on the train, they were pretty good, though there were some suspicious moments as well. But before we get to that, I want to start with an anti-mole action, and if you're new here on this channel, then let me quickly explain what that is. An anti-mole action is something somebody did which turned out to be pretty good, and that actually is like a hint to the fact that that person is not the mole or could not be the mole. And in this case we're talking about an anti-mole action concerning Lieselot. Because as you know, while being on the train they had to solve those riddles, and one riddle was about important moments in history, as I would say. And she immediately knew that they would have to choose that moment which was about the death of Queen Elizabeth. And that one turned out to be the correct one. And why I think this is an anti-mole action is because she could very well explain how that situation happened back last year. I still remember that situation very well as well, and that's why I knew she was correct and that other person who doubted her wasn't correct. And she had the right explanation for it, she was correct, and that's why it's an anti-mole action. And at the same time, it's a mole action either from Comfort or from Lila. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that person talking, so we only got to see the voice, if I remember it correctly. And it was either Layla or Comfort who doubted Lieselot's answer. And that's why they chose that Barack Obama inauguration moment, I think, which turned out to be the incorrect one. I think it was Comfort, but I'm not sure. It could have also been Layla, and in the end they could still come up with the right solution, but of course it costed them time. Next suspicious thing that happened in that group was again connected a bit to Layla, because that was the moment when they chose the only wrong item, and Zamya was involved in that situation as well, but she's out of the game now. So Layla in the end picked out more or less the wrong item, and that of course is suspicious as well. And one more suspicious moment Layla had in that group was when she doubted that the vase would be the correct item. So Lancelot was pretty sure that they would need to choose the item right in front of them, the vase with the flowers in it, and in the end they listened to Lancelot, but Layla, well, was very unsure about that and tried to, well, influence the group in a different direction. And one more important thing we probably need to keep in mind is that only Zamya and Layla weren't drinking alcohol, and that of course was very important concerning who would drive later that day, but we will get back to that in a minute. But first let's have a look at the other group, and of course we will start with the most obvious mole action, and that one was that Toes wasn't able to solve that toolbox riddle. So you probably already know what Toes is doing for a living, because I talked about that in my The Candidates video. If you haven't watched that one yet, then I really recommend watching it. But I will tell you what he's doing for a living anyway right now, and that is that he's a carpenter. At least that's the best translation I could find. So he's working a lot with wood, and of course also is using tools for that, which is why people in the group and, well, probably you at home and me as well thought that is like the perfect task for him. I mean, in the end, they came up with the right solution, but Connie and Thomas were involved as well in that, with a lot of logic. And Toes, well, I did expect more of him in that case. And for the mole, of course, this is a perfect option to lose a lot of time, actually very precious time, which you need to build up those net constructions. And about those net constructions, there is a more, well, action from Ruben, because he suggests to test those constructions by throwing really heavy stones in them, which could like break those constructions, meaning they would have to start again, and all of those things. And Guido Verheijen, so Wie is de Mol Guido, who is a Dutch YouTuber and does sensitive videos in Dutch, he connected that action to a mole action we had 2 years ago, which means that I will talk about a spoiler now, but this was like a really brilliant connection, I think. So back then in the Germany season they had a task where they had to build up domino stones, and the mole back then decided to test the domino reaction. So he basically ruined some of the work they had already done to test the reaction, which costed them a lot of time. And it could have ended, well, in a similar way this time, but the constructions luckily didn't, well, break down. Now we have to talk about that special situation that took place between both tasks, and that one was the situation with the cars and the scenes they got to watch. First of all, the drivers were in such a good position, and of course the mole would know that beforehand. So I personally think for the mole it would be very interesting to be a driver. And as I've already mentioned it, the people in the train group didn't really have like a lot of people left who could drive, simply because they were drinking those alcoholic drinks, those alcoholic cocktails. So only Layla and Samia were left in that group who could drive. And for the other group it was more or less luck-based, unless Ruben is the mole. I'm not so sure what to think about that, to be honest, because I personally think it's a bit unfair to all the other candidates, because they didn't know that would happen, and that being the driver would have such an important meaning in that situation. So for 8 candidates there wasn't at all ever the chance to watch all of those scenes. So I'm not so sure what to think about that. You can let me know what you think about that situation. But let's quickly talk about why the mole would probably like to be driver, and that one reminded me of the last Wie is de Mol season, the one this year. So if you have not watched that one yet and still want to, then this here's a spoiler. Because in that season we had a situation where there was a chance to talk to the mole on the phone and to win like that chance in a task, and Jure, who turned out to be the mole, won the game, which meant that he had the chance to talk to himself on the phone. And there were some discussions whether or not the mole would like to do that, and in the end a lot of older moles, and he as well, said, well, of course the mole would like to do that, because the risk of getting caught is still there, and as mole you don't want to have any other candidate figuring out it's you. Although we have to say that they used the computer's voice, so there wasn't that high chance that they would recognize Jure as the mole. But in this case, in the Belgian season, it's not a voice we hear and no computer voice, it's a video. It's a scene in which you had to act as mole, and I personally believe the mole wouldn't like to, well, let the other candidates see that unless he or she is very sure about his or her acting skills. Definitely let me know what you thought about those scenes, and if you've spotted someone acting in there, I'm really curious to read about all of your, well, thoughts on that in the comments below. Let's talk about task number 2, and I have to be honest, it was my favorite task. So I personally think it was way too long, it took way too much time of that episode. And yeah, I think the idea definitely was that they would finally get some money in that pot. It's just the way that task was, well, designed, that there was the chance of earning a lot of money. So that was probably the intention, but I just thought it was very long and in the end didn't give me as a person watching it that much, because there weren't that many more actions in there or suspicious moments. But we still talk about it, of course, and I think that the best position to influence the game, and probably to more, was when you were in the potato peeling group. That's what I call them. So Samya and Lieselot actually were in a very important spot with throwing and peeling all the potatoes, because they had direct influence on the other group. And you know that they did influence them sometimes too quickly, by throwing potatoes too quickly, then again by not throwing potatoes or not quick enough. So that definitely was a very good position to have a huge influence, which means that it would be a good position for them all. But then again, there's only one person left of the group, because Samya left. And that means it makes Lieselot suspicious. But the question is, would they really want it to be that obvious? And we should not forget that the peeled potatoes in the end were the money. So when you are in this group, you have like the important position to decide how much money there will be in the end. Of course it gets doubled or even more, but still that's like the basic money, and as mole you could influence how much that would be, and that would really be a good position for a mole. Let's have a look at the other group. There were some smaller things, for example the fact that Toes and Lila didn't make it back to the finish in task number 2 in time, which in the end was probably because Toes had to run 3 rounds, right, one after another. But then again, this is like a brilliant excuse to walk some bits, and in general we didn't really get to see any suspicious behavior. Of course sometimes people walked a bit, but yeah, run that much with 8-kilogram rucksacks on your back. I mean, it's understandable that some of them walked some time. And when it came to the potato guns, there were 2 more things. First thing was that, of course, for the mole, if he is in that group, it would be interesting to grab that bucket with the peeled potatoes, because the peeled potatoes mean money. And that was Toes, he was the one who grabbed the bucket. And then, although Samya and Lieselot were standing right next to him, Lancelot suggested to still use those potatoes, even though they had already explained that the potatoes were money. So yeah, I'm not so sure if the mole would do that, because it's a bit right into your face, but still suspicious, of course. They were all hints and theories to episode number 2 so far. Let me know what you think about them, and if you've spotted anything else that was suspicious. I'm always very interested in reading your ideas and your thoughts to that episode and to who the mole is. If you do not want to miss any further hints and theories videos, then make sure to subscribe to this channel here and check out my Instagram. You can also join our International Fans Facebook group. I will be back next week with the new Hints and Theories video to episode number 3. I hope you will be back then as well, and until then I wish you a great week and so much fun watching the next episode. Until then, bye!